As Lee County Sheriff, Liston Truesdale knew most of the citizens well. Did they really see this creature? And if they did, what does he think it was?
I think they are certainly telling the truth, and what they saw almost scared them to death.
Now, these people are not prone to exaggeration, are they?
With the experience I've had with law enforcement, you can tell when they're telling the truth. And what puts credibility to this case is the fact that they didn't come to us. All of them, we had to go to them. And when we asked them, well, why didn't you report it? And they said, well, I didn't want to be ridiculed by my peers.
So Lizard Man was very big news in this town. It must have had a huge impact on the town and on you.
Oh, yeah. They were making bets everywhere where we was going to catch it or what, or solve it, or what the problem was. So we sent for these people to come in. And Chris Davis's daddy brought him in first, and he was the first one to come in.
You actually gave Christopher Davis a polygraph test.
I think he was lucky to tell us anything, because it pretty near scared him to death. But he passed his lie detector test.
So does the lie detector test prove that Christopher Davis was telling the truth, that he saw a lizard man?
It proved that he saw something, yeah. We were going to hypnotize him and put him in a hypnosis, and but we never did it. And I'll be fair with you, I was glad to get rid of all this because it nearly worked us to death.
Now, you mentioned that he drew a picture of the creature. How did he describe it to you?
I couldn't believe what he was telling me. It was so far out. And I said, draw it. And he drew it. And we have the picture, the original drawing that he drew. The head looked like a human, but what amazed me was the 3 fingers and the toed feet. When he drew it, I said, is that what you saw? And he said, that's exactly what I saw. I know that people, his peers gave him a hard time. They even nicknamed him the Lizard Man. But as I wind up saying this, that I can't prove that there was anything out there, and I can't prove that there wasn't.
So, what was the creature that haunted the people of Bishopville? Is it possible that there's some reptilian creature out there we don't know about? Some unknown and extremely rare reptoid hybrid? After all, Komodo dragons, the world's biggest lizards, were considered a fairy tale at one time too.
The human brainstem is often referred to as the reptilian brain because of its physical similarities, although they have very different functions. If Lizard Man is real, some cryptozoologists wonder what kind of abilities it has evolved.
There is one man who believes that a rare humanoid reptile could exist. Cryptozoologist John Rhodes. I've asked Dan and Nat to meet up with John to find out more about these bizarre reptilian creatures. According to John, it all goes back to the age of the dinosaur.
So what do you think these creatures are, and what can you ascertain about their abilities?
Well, considering the research that I've been doing over a number of years, it appears that these might just be natural extensions of our own Earth evolution, that they're just an extension of our own biology here on Earth that evolved perhaps parallel to mankind shortly before, or maybe even a long time before, we evolved into a sentient species.
So you think these creatures evolved from dinosaurs that weren't wiped out with the alleged meteor extinction?
They possibly could be. There's a very famous American paleontologist who did a study based on the morphological changes, or the changes in form, of a dinosaur 65 million years ago that was called Troodon. This dinosaur had a relatively large brain for its size. It had eyes that were coming from the side of its head more towards the front to allow it to see across, and has stereoscopic vision, gives it better predator skills. And he said, based on the changes that they had seen over a long period of time, where this dinosaur looked like in the past and where it was when they last had the evidence of its existence, if you had extrapolated that just a little bit further, where was it headed? And he said this thing would, if it had been allowed to evolve past the point 65 million years ago, when the meteor, supposed meteor, came down to create all this devastation. And the model he came up with was strikingly similar to what was described in the accounts of Genesis, accounts of ancient history, as well as what people are reporting nowadays, a humanoid reptilian form, or reptoid. These creatures may have actually evolved sentient intelligence before humans, and their technologies also would be perceived as more advanced than ours. Number one, because they'd had more time to work on it. Look where we've come in 100 years. I mean, we've gone from the buggy to going to other planets. And in addition to that, their physics that they would be utilizing in their technologies would appear to be magical or even extraterrestrial, because their brains are working differently than mammal brains. So perhaps their perceptions and their abilities to reach different intellectual levels are different than ours. So they would see things, and their technologies would be built differently. So what we're really looking at is a composite description from many people around the United States and also internationally. We talk about beings that are anywhere from 6.5 to 7.5 feet tall. They have beaded skin like a lizard, or scaled skin like a serpent. They have the physical form of the humanoid. Usually they don't see any ears or anything. It could be just flat along the sides of their heads, or small pinholes. They have a very flat nose. They have eyes that are very almond-shaped with vertical slit pupils, which is very disturbing for people to see. They have sometimes ventricular ridges that go up over the sides of their heads, that sometimes they actually come off their heads by about a half an inch, and from an angle this must look like horns laying across the back of your skull. They have 3 fingers with an opposable thumb. Sometimes the claws can be long and sharp, sometimes they can be blunted almost like a dog's, a dark color. Their legs have been very well pronounced muscularly. They also have feet that have been seen to have 3 toes with a receded 4th up near where we would have an ankle. And some of them have been seen with tails, but most of the time they're seen without tails.
Humanoid reptiles? A definite kink in the evolutionary theory, my darlings.
Yeah, I can show you.
Cryptozoologist Richard Freeman has another explanation for lizard man.
So do you believe that these reptilian creatures that are attacking people aren't real flesh and blood creatures?
If you mean the so-called lizard men, no,
Good morning.
I don't believe they're flesh and blood creatures. Nothing like that has ever existed in the fossil record. As far as we know, nothing like that has ever existed today. A scientist, a paleontologist in fact, called Dr. Dale Russell, hypothesised in the late 70s that had certain types of small saurosaur dinosaurs, such as Troodon, carried on evolving. If they hadn't become extinct at the end of the Cretaceous, they would have evolved into a humanoid type reptile that would have been at least as intelligent as human beings. But I think that is a rather Victorian view, rather narcissistic as well, modelling an animal on us. Now we know that evolution doesn't work that way. It isn't trying or striving to make things more intelligent. It's just adapting them to what is around at the time. A good example of this is sauropod dinosaurs, the large plant-eating dinosaurs. As they grew bigger, their necks grew longer, their hearts had to pump more and more blood up towards the brain. So they evolved smaller brains and became less intelligent, because their necks became longer to allow them to browse on higher vegetation. So this idea of evolution always making things more intelligent is a very Victorian view and a wrong one.
What do you think these reptilian beings are, these lizard men?
Lizard men, I think, are a product of the human mind. You've only got to look in popular culture and media, and they're everywhere. We have the Sea Devils in the long-running science fiction serial Doctor Who. We have the villainous lizard in the Spider-Man comics. We have the reptilian creatures in the series V. They're everywhere. In legend, in culture, they're part of some very deep-rooted thing within humanity. You must remember that our primitive ancestors, around 3 million years ago on the plains of East Africa, the Australopithecines, the things that would have given them the most sleepless nights would have been crocodiles and large constricting snakes. So I think this fear of reptiles that a lot of people have is maybe a fossil memory, something inherited from our distant ancestors.
So how do you explain the lizard man encounters?
Maybe it was somebody in a costume, some sort of a hoax, maybe it was a media exaggeration, and maybe it was something genuinely paranormal.
Paranormal phenomenon? Some ancient peoples do believe in animal spirits that can materialize into earthly forms.
The whole piece.
Daniel and Natalie follow that lead to Whitewater in Wisconsin, where they're about to tour a strange burial ground covered with animal effigies, including some that resemble lizards.
I'm really interested in having a look at the lizard mound.
Yeah. So we're going to have a look. Some of these burial mounds were built over 1,000 years ago, and Nat and I are about to meet Linda Godfrey, an author who's been investigating these mounds and has some interesting theories. So Linda, tell us a little bit about these animal effigy mounds.
The animal effigy mounds are very special because they are found mostly in the southern half of Wisconsin, and mounds exactly like them are not found anywhere else in the world, really. And they're old. They were constructed between 300 and 1300 AD, so that they were probably made by the ancestors of a local tribe called the Ho-Chunk.
No one really knows very much about these mounds or why they were built. But one thing that is known is that there were thousands and thousands of them, and these people went to great trouble and labour to build them.
We have bird effigies, earth-type animals such as bear, panther, and deer, and then we have water spirits, which are generally considered spirit beings, represented by turtles, lizards, and the mysterious water panther.
There's been some strange sightings of creatures like lizard men and things like that. Do you think there's a relation between these mounds and these strange sightings that people have been having?
It occurred to me that perhaps if these mounds represented spirit beings, perhaps that the Native Americans performed rites or had beliefs that these mounds could actually hold the spirit beings within them. And I began wondering if perhaps when all the settlers came and began plowing over these mounds, so many of them were destroyed or cut into. Used to be a popular Sunday afternoon activity to go and open an Indian mound, as they called it. That if these were indeed sacred containers for these spirit animals that perhaps were related to earth energies or earth spirits, that maybe it's like letting the genie out of the bottle, and that you have, therefore, from lizard mounds, you have lizard men, and from the bear and the panther mounds, you have these wolfish or ape-type beings that come out. And this is just my own fanciful theory. You know, I have to emphasize that. But it does tie into a lot of lore that I've been able to discover.
You guys don't know.
We're in a very sacred site here where the ancestors of Native Americans possibly used to congregate here and perhaps used to bury their dead underneath these mounds. And they'd use these mounds to symbolise different spirit animals to perhaps protect their dead. And maybe that's where Linda gets her idea that once these mounds are disturbed, that these spirits then become unleashed. And that's why we've got all these modern day sightings of half animal, half human creatures.
Well, that's right. It's a very spiritual place here. They used to, as you said, they used to congregate here. It was their church. It was their school, their meeting place. You know, they used to work out any problems they used to have and things like that. Celebrations were done here. Lots of things. And they were possibly built as tributes to the spirits of the air and the earth and the water. And that's why they represent all these different animals. They've got the lizard, the bird, the fish, the cougar and the panther. So they're a very spiritual place.
Do you think because Native Americans have been in touch with nature for thousands and thousands of years,